Maya was a young girl who lived in a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other. It wasn't a place that often saw many visitors or strangers, and most people in the town held onto old traditions that had been passed down for generations. Maya, however, was different. She wasn't like most of the people in the town. She had big dreams. Dreams of going far away, of exploring places, meeting new people, and living a life full of adventure. She loved reading books, especially about faraway lands and people who overcame great challenges. Her mother often told her that her curiosity and imagination were her greatest strengths. But the traditions of the town were strong, and they were always present. One of the oldest traditions was that a woman's life was decided by marriage. Families would arrange marriages for their daughters, and the idea of rejecting such an arrangement was seen as almost impossible. Maya knew this. Her family had made it clear from a young age that she would eventually marry a man from the town, someone they thought was appropriate for her. Maya didn't like that idea at all. She wanted to marry for love, not because her family thought it was the right thing to do. She had seen her mother and other women in the town live their lives in silence, doing what was expected of them without questioning. Maya refused to be like them. She believed there was more to life than just following orders. She dreamed of choosing her own path, of becoming someone who made her own decisions, not someone who lived to please others. One day, while Maya was walking back home from the market, she came across Officer Mark. He was a man in his mid-30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a uniform that commanded respect. Officer Mark was one of the most influential men in the town. He was known for his power, and many people feared him. He had a reputation for getting what he wanted and for being ruthless when it came to people who didn't fall in line with the town's traditions. Maya walked through the town's narrow streets, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt heavier than the last. It seemed as though Officer Mark's shadow was always lurking behind her, watching her every move. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite her best efforts to ignore him, his presence was constant, like an unwelcome storm hanging on the horizon. That afternoon, as Maya passed the old bakery, she noticed Officer Mark standing by the corner, his eyes fixed on her. She quickened her pace, her fingers clutching the straps of her bag tighter. She could hear his footsteps echoing behind her, growing louder as he drew closer. Her heart raced, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread building in her chest. She turned a corner, hoping to lose him, but his footsteps never stopped. "Maya," Officer Mark's voice called out behind her, smooth and insistent. "I'm not." Maya's heart raced as she strained her eyes to see the movement in the trees. Her mind struggled to process the sight, but there it was again, a flicker of motion. Was it a person? Or was her fear playing tricks on Maya? Sat quietly in the back of the seal's truck as it bumped down the road, the sound of tires crunching over gravel almost soothing in its rhythm. The steady motion, the steady hum of the engine, gave her a chance to breathe. It had been a long, difficult day, and the shock was starting to wear off. She had survived, but it was more than that. She was free. Free from Officer Mark's control, free from the constant fear that had plagued her every day. But even as she let the relief wash over her, her mind was still racing. What would happen next? What was going to happen to her now? The leader of the SEAL team, whose name she still hadn't asked, glanced back at her. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of understanding. "We're heading to a safe house," he said, his voice steady, "where you'll be able to rest and get some answers. You're not going to be left alone, Maya. We're not going to leave you in the dark." Maya nodded, grateful for his reassurances, but her heart still felt heavy with questions. She was safe now, yes, but how did everything get so out of control? How had she ended up in this nightmare in the first place? The SEAL leader must have sensed her unease, because he turned to face her fully, his expression softening slightly. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said. But you're not in this alone anymore. We're going to make sure that everything is handled properly. You don't have to worry about him anymore. Maya took a deep breath and looked out the window, watching the world pass by in a blur of trees and houses. The sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow across the sky, and for the first time all day, she felt a sense of peace. The danger was over. She was safe. But there was still something unsettled in her heart. Something that she needed to understand. "Can you tell me more about Officer Mark?" she asked, her voice small. "Why did he do this? Why me?" The leader sighed, his gaze turning distant, as though he was weighing how much to reveal. "Mark has been trouble for a long time," he said finally. "He's always been about power and control. We believe he's used his position to exploit vulnerable people in the past, but this is the first time he's gone this far. He's been manipulating situations, trying to force people into doing what he wants. And he thought he could do that to you, Maya. But he was wrong." Maya's chest tightened at his words. Officer Mark hadn't just been cruel to her, he'd been doing this to others. She shuddered at the thought of how many other lives he had affected in the same way. The realization made her blood boil, but it also gave her the strength to stand firm. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. She wasn't going to let him ruin more lives. As the truck turned down a narrow dirt road, the SEAL leader spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "We've got eyes on him. He's not going to escape justice. But we also have something you need to know. We've been gathering evidence against him for a while. Your story is the final piece we needed to bring him down for good." Maya looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. "You mean, you've been watching him? You knew what he was doing before I even met him?" The leader nodded. "Exactly. We've been tracking his movements, making sure we had enough to build a case. We couldn't move in until we were certain, until we had all the proof we needed. And now, because of you, we can bring him to justice." Maya felt a sense of pride swelling inside her. She had always felt so small in the face of injustice, but now, she had played a part in stopping it. She had given the SEALs the missing piece of the puzzle that they needed. She had helped to stop a man who had hurt so many others, and she knew that, in the end, his reign of terror would come to an end. The truck finally came to a stop in front of a small, inconspicuous house hidden away in the woods. It looked like an ordinary home, but Maya could tell that it was anything but. The security around it was tight, and there were men posted at various points, watching for any sign of trouble. The SEAL leader got out first, signaling for Maya to follow. As she stepped out of the truck, she felt a little wobbly, her legs still shaky from everything that had happened. But the SEALs were there to steady her, guiding her to the door. Inside the safe house, the atmosphere was calm and professional. There were no signs of chaos, no rush of activity. Everything seemed controlled, organized. It was exactly what she needed, a place where she could gather her thoughts, a place where she could feel safe. The SEAL leader led her to a room where a few other team members were already gathered. "Maya," he said, his voice warm. "This is where you'll stay for now. We've got everything you need here: food, medical attention, a place to rest. Take your time to settle in." Maya nodded, still feeling like she was in a bit of a daze. She wasn't sure what to do next, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't stay in this house forever. She had a life to rebuild. She had dreams she wanted to chase, a future to create. She wasn't going to let this dark chapter of her life define her. The SEAL leader seemed to sense her thoughts. "We'll be with you every step of the way, Maya," he said. "You don't have to face this alone. We've got your back." As she settled into the room, Maya felt a sense of comfort wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. The weight of everything that had happened, the fear, the pain, the confusion, it was still there, lingering in the background, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been. She had survived. And now, she had a chance to start over. The next few days were filled with phone calls, paperwork, and the details that came with putting things in motion. The SEAL team worked with the authorities, gathering evidence and making sure that Officer Mark would be held accountable for his actions. Maya was called in to give her statement, to testify about what had happened. But through it all, she felt a sense of strength she hadn't known she had. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor, and she was ready to take control of her own life. As the weeks went by, Maya kept her head high. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, there would be moments when she doubted herself. But she also knew that she was capable of overcoming them. She had faced down her darkest fears, and she had come out the other side stronger than before. And through it all, the SEALs remained by her side, offering their support, their protection. But Maya knew that it was her own courage that had brought her this far. And with that courage, she knew that she could face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Maya was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, and nothing, not Officer Mark, not anyone, was going to take it away. Her. The sound. Maya stood in the clearing, her hands still shaking as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The Navy SEALs, who had come out of nowhere to rescue her, were now securing Officer Mark, ensuring that he was fully restrained and wouldn't be able to cause any more harm. The sound of the train, which had nearly been her undoing, was now distant, but the adrenaline in her veins hadn't yet worn off. Her mind was spinning with questions, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. How had all of this happened? How had she gone from being helpless, chained to a set of train tracks, to standing here, alive, and safe, with people who had literally saved her life? The leader of the SEALs, the man who had spoken to her earlier, came over and knelt down in front of her. His eyes were calm and understanding, as if he'd seen too many things in his life to be surprised by much anymore, but there was a softness in his gaze when he looked at her, something that told her that they cared about what had happened to her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, as though testing the waters. "You're safe now, but we need to make sure you're all right." Maya nodded, the words almost stuck in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. She was okay, wasn't she? But at the same time, her mind was still racing. She was so overwhelmed by everything: the fear, the danger, the shock of being saved by a group of Navy SEALs, that she could hardly process the emotions that were bubbling up inside her. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "I think I'm in shock. I don't know what just happened." The man gave her a reassuring smile, but it was a smile that held an understanding she couldn't quite grasp. "That's completely normal. This has been a lot to take in." He glanced at his team, who were now carefully securing Officer Mark and making sure he couldn't escape. "He won't be hurting anyone again." Maya looked over at Officer Mark, who was glaring at the SEALs, his face twisted with anger and defeat. He had been so confident just moments ago, like he was in control, like he could do whatever he wanted. But now, he was nothing. Just another criminal, caught and restrained, with no power over her anymore. It was a strange feeling, seeing him like that. She almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then she remembered everything he had done, how he had threatened her, tried to control her, and how she had nearly lost everything because of him. She quickly pushed the sympathy away. He didn't deserve it. Turning her attention back to the SEALs, she saw that the group was working efficiently. They were organized, focused, and determined. Maya couldn't help but marvel at the way they moved, the way they worked as a team, the way they had handled the situation with such precision. It was clear that these men were professionals, and that they had been trained for situations like this. But despite their military demeanor, there was an underlying kindness in their actions when it came to her. They weren't just here to do a job, they were here to protect her, and that made all the difference. The leader of the SEALs stood up, taking a moment to survey the area. His eyes met hers again. "We're going to get you out of here. You're safe, Maya, but we need to take you to a secure location where you'll be protected until everything is sorted out." Maya blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "You mean I'm going to be safe now?" Her voice barely sounded like her own, small, almost unsure. He nodded, his expression serious. "Yes. We'll make sure of it. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry anymore." The words hit her like a wave. Safety. Protection. All the fear she had carried with her for days, maybe even longer, began to feel a little less heavy. She could finally exhale. She could finally allow herself to believe that things might actually be okay. But as the SEALs prepared to move, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she still needed answers. There were so many questions, so much confusion. Why had Officer Mark targeted her in the first place? What had driven him to act the way he did? And most importantly, how had the Navy SEALs known where she was? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and turned to the leader of the SEALs. "How did you know where to find me? How did you know what was happening?" The man's expression softened again, and he gestured for her to follow him. As the team secured Officer Mark and prepared to leave, the leader walked alongside Maya, speaking quietly so the others wouldn't overhear. "We've been keeping an eye on Officer Mark for some time now," he explained. "He's been involved in a lot of questionable activities. Our team had been tracking him for weeks, trying to gather enough evidence to take him down. We didn't know exactly when he'd try something like this, but we knew it was only a matter of time. When we got the intel that you were in danger, we moved in as fast as we could." Maya listened intently, trying to process the information. It was hard to wrap her mind around it, the idea that there were people out there, people like these SEALs, who had been watching over her, waiting for the right moment to step in and save her. They had been her silent protectors, even though she had never known. I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. "Thank you. For everything." The leader gave her a small smile. "You don't have to say anything. We just did what needed to be done." As they walked toward the trucks that would take her to safety, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude toward these men who had appeared out of nowhere and changed the course of her life. But she also knew that the journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be legal battles, and Officer Mark would have to face the consequences for what he had done. But more than that, Maya knew that she was no longer the same person she had been before. She had survived. She had been pushed to the brink of fear and despair, and yet she was still standing. With the SEALs by her side, she didn't feel so alone anymore. And as the truck rumbled down the dirt road, taking her away from the woods and toward a new chapter of her life, Maya couldn't help but feel like this was just the beginning of something much bigger. She wasn't going to be a victim anymore. She was going to take control of her own future, and nothing, not Officer Mark, not anyone, was going to stop her. The train grew louder, closer now, making the ground beneath her tremble. She could feel the vibrations through her body, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed ahead. She tugged at the chains desperately, but they were too tight. Panic started to rise in her chest, her breathing coming faster, more erratic. She couldn't give up now. There had to be something she could do. She couldn't let Officer Mark win. She wouldn't let him take her life. Just when it seemed like the world was closing in around her, the figure in the trees moved again, stepping into the clearing with stealthy precision. Maya blinked, trying to focus her eyes on the figure, who was now getting closer. It wasn't Officer Mark, that much was clear. But who could it be? Her breath caught in her throat as the figure emerged from the trees wearing tactical gear and a stern expression. A group of men, all wearing similar military uniforms, stepped into the clearing, moving with purpose. They were trained, disciplined, and their presence immediately commanded authority. Maya's pulse slowed for a moment, a mix of confusion and hope flooding through her. Who were these people? "Stay down," one of the men said, his voice firm and calm. His words were directed at Officer Mark, who had turned to face them, clearly startled by the unexpected intrusion. Officer Mark's smug expression faltered, but he didn't back down. "What is this?" Officer Mark growled, taking a step forward. "Who the hell are you?" The leader of the group, a tall man with dark eyes and a commanding presence, raised his hand slightly, signaling for the others to stay back. "We're here to make sure no one gets hurt," he said, his voice low and steady. "You need to leave now, or you'll regret it." Maya, still chained to the tracks, watched in awe as the men took control of the situation. These weren't just random strangers, they were professionals. They moved as one unit, each man aware of the role he had to play. They didn't hesitate or falter. It was clear they were prepared for anything. Maya's mind raced, trying to process everything that was happening. Could they be here to help her? She wanted to believe it, but the fear that had been building in her chest kept her on edge. She couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. Officer Mark's face twisted with rage. "This is none of your business," he shouted, his hand reaching for his gun. But before he could even draw it, the leader of the group moved swiftly. With expert precision, the man disarmed him in a single motion, twisting Officer Mark's wrist and sending the gun flying to the ground. Maya gasped in disbelief, watching as Officer Mark struggled to break free, but the men quickly subdued him, holding him in place. The leader of the group, who had remained calm and composed throughout the entire encounter, turned to Maya with a look of reassurance. "Don't worry," he said softly, crouching down in front of her. "You're safe now." Maya could barely process his words. Her mind was still spinning, trying to grasp the fact that she had been saved. She looked up at the leader, feeling a rush of gratitude wash over her. Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. "We're Navy SEALs," he replied simply, his gaze unwavering as he glanced over his shoulder to make sure Officer Mark was fully restrained. "We've been tracking him for a while. He's been getting away with too much for too long." Maya's eyes widened. Navy SEALs? She couldn't believe it. This group of highly trained men had come out of nowhere, appearing just when she needed them most. The fear that had once consumed her now started to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. "Thank you," Maya whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't know if anyone would come." The leader gave her a reassuring smile. "That's what we're here for. To make sure you're safe." Maya could hardly believe it. It felt like a dream. She had been chained to the tracks, staring down certain danger, and now here she was, free, surrounded by men who had come to save her. She hadn't known if she would ever see another day, but now, the nightmare was over. As the SEALs worked quickly to secure Officer Mark, Maya noticed the train in the distance. It was coming fast, the sound of the wheels on the tracks growing louder with every passing second. The SEALs moved efficiently, securing the area around her, making sure she was clear of the tracks. Maya was too overwhelmed to speak, too relieved to do anything but watch as the men took control of the situation. Within moments, Officer Mark was fully restrained, his hands bound behind his back. The SEALs moved with precision, their every action calculated, and Officer Mark was powerless to do anything but glare at them. He had been outmatched, and Maya couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction at the turn of events. The man who had thought he could control her had been brought to his knees by the very people he had underestimated. The train finally arrived, rushing past at full speed, the wind from the train's passage blowing through the trees. Maya stood there, watching the powerful machine race by, the sense of danger now gone. She felt the weight of everything she had just endured, the fear, the helplessness, and the overwhelming relief. After the train had passed, the seals gathered around her once more. One of them, the leader, walked over and unlocked the chains that had held her captive. As the cold metal fell away, Maya rubbed her wrists, her skin raw from the tight grip of the chains. She could finally breathe freely again. "You're free now," the leader said, his voice warm but firm. "You don't have to worry anymore." Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." The man nodded, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank us. We're just doing our job. But you've got a story to tell, and I think it's one the world needs to hear." Maya nodded, feeling a wave of emotions wash over her. She had survived, and now, she had the chance to take control of her own story. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. As the seals began to move Officer Mark, preparing to take him away, Maya watched them with a sense of finality. The nightmare was over. She was free. And with the Navy SEALs by her side, she knew that no matter what came next, she would face it with strength and courage. The world seemed to open up before her, a future full of possibilities. Maya wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor, and her story was far from over. Going to let you run away from me. We need to talk. Maya's legs moved faster as she picked up the pace, but Officer Mark was gaining on her. She couldn't outrun him. She had no choice but to stop, turning around to face him, though her mind was screaming for her to keep going. "What do you want?" Maya demanded, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I've already told you I'm not interested." Officer Mark took a step closer, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "You're making a big mistake. I've been patient, but I'm done waiting. It's time for you to accept what's meant to be." Maya's stomach churned with anxiety, but she stood her ground. "I don't want this. You can't force me into something I don't want. I won't be a part of your plan." He didn't seem to care about her words. Instead, he smiled, a cold and calculating smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "You think you have a choice in this? You don't. I'll make sure of it." Before she could react, Officer Mark's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with surprising force. He yanked her toward him, and for a moment, she froze, panic flooding her body. His grip tightened, and her pulse quickened as she struggled to pull away. But he was too strong. "Let go of me!" Maya shouted, her voice breaking the quiet afternoon. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the rush of her heart in her ears. "I won't," he said, his voice low and determined. "You're mine now, Maya. I won't let you go." Maya's breath hitched, and a wave of fear washed over her. She could feel the tightness in her chest, the way her lungs seemed to close up. He was right. She couldn't fight him. He was too powerful. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, making her feel small and helpless. But even then, deep down, Maya refused to give in. With every ounce of strength, Maya tugged at her wrist, desperate to break free. Her body burned with the effort. She twisted and turned, trying to escape his grasp, but Officer Mark didn't loosen his hold. His grip seemed to tighten with every movement she made. "I'm not afraid of you," she managed to say through clenched teeth, though her voice was shaky. "I don't care what you think. I'll never be yours." Officer Mark didn't seem to be listening. His face remained unreadable, his eyes cold as ice. He took a step closer, the space between them closing. He was just inches away now. Maya could feel his breath on her skin, and it made her want to gag. He smelled of tobacco and something that made her stomach turn. "You think you have a choice," he said softly, his words like a threat. "You'll see. I'll make sure you understand." Without warning, he yanked her harder, dragging her toward the edge of town, past the quiet homes and down a narrow path that led into the woods. Maya stumbled as he pulled her along, trying her best to keep her footing, but she could barely keep up with his pace. "Stop! Where are you taking me?" Maya demanded, her voice rising with panic. She didn't understand what he was doing, but the fear in her chest was growing. He wasn't listening. He wasn't saying anything. As they entered the woods, the trees grew denser, casting shadows over the path. Maya's mind raced, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to get away. She had to find a way out of this. But the more she struggled, the more she realized that Officer Mark was taking her somewhere far away from anyone who could help. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of walking through the woods, they reached a clearing. Maya's eyes widened when she saw what was in front of her, a set of railway tracks running through the middle of nowhere. The sound of a distant train's whistle echoed through the trees, and a chill ran down Maya's spine. She knew what this was. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, don't." But Officer Mark didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. He marched over to the tracks and, without saying a word, reached into his bag and pulled out a set of heavy chains. Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. She tried to back away, but he was too quick. Before she could react, he looped the chains around her wrists, locking them tightly in place. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she realized what he was doing. He wasn't just threatening her. He was chaining her to the tracks. He was going to leave her here, alone, to face the train that was speeding toward her. "Please, stop!" Maya cried, her voice desperate as she struggled against the chains. But Officer Mark only looked at her with cold, unfeeling eyes. "This is what happens when you don't know your place," he said, his voice calm, almost like he was teaching her a lesson. "You're going to learn to respect me." The sound of the train grew louder, closer now. Maya could feel the vibrations in the ground beneath her feet. She was trapped. There was no escape. Her heart raced in her chest as she realized the train was coming, and she was powerless to stop it. In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world around her faded into the background as she faced the reality of what was about to happen. But even though fear gripped her, she didn't give up. She wouldn't let him break her. She couldn't. There had to be a way out. There had to be someone who could help her. And then, just as the train's horn sounded in the distance, something changed. A flicker of movement in the trees caught Maya's eye. She looked up, her heart racing even faster. What was that? Who was there? Her pulse quickened. Maya wasn't alone anymore. Something was about to happen that would change everything. When Maya first met him, he was friendly enough, but there was something unsettling about him. He had a way of looking at her, a look that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't the kind of look a man gives a woman when he admires her beauty. It was something else, something possessive, like he thought she belonged to him in some way. Over the next few days, Officer Mark began to show up more often in places where Maya was. He would run into her at the market, or offer to walk her home when it was getting dark. At first, Maya thought it was just a coincidence. But as time went on, she started to feel as though he was watching her. It became clear that he was interested in her. And not in the way that a kind, respectful person might be. Officer Mark was used to getting what he wanted, and he was used to women saying yes to him. His advances grew bolder, and he would often compliment her, telling her how lucky she would be to marry someone like him. Maya was polite at first. She didn't want to cause trouble. But as time went on, his comments began to feel more like pressure than compliments. She knew that he was a powerful man, and his attention made her uneasy. He had a way of speaking to her that made her feel like she didn't have a choice. He acted as if it was inevitable that they would end up together. He even started talking about their future, how they would get married and build a life together. Maya felt trapped. One day, as Maya was walking through the town square, Officer Mark approached her again. This time, he was even more persistent than usual. He told her how much he admired her, how he had been thinking about her constantly. His words were sweet at first, but they started to feel empty and controlling. Maya knew what he was really saying, that he expected her to say yes to him, and she would have no choice but to do so. "Why don't you ever say yes to me, Maya?" Officer Mark asked, his voice smooth but firm. "I'm a good man. I can give you everything you need. You'll be lucky to marry me." Maya felt her heart race. She wasn't the type to back down easily, and she wasn't about to start now. She looked him in the eye and spoke her mind. "I don't want to marry you. I'm not interested. I want to make my own decisions." Officer Mark's face hardened. His charming smile faded, and his eyes narrowed. For a moment, Maya felt a wave of fear wash over her. But she held her ground. "I'm not asking, Maya. I'm telling you. You don't have a choice in the matter," he said, his voice colder now. "You'll see, you'll come around. All you need is a little time." Maya's stomach twisted with unease. She tried to walk away, but Officer Mark grabbed her arm firmly. "You can't walk away from me. Not when you're making a big mistake." Maya yanked her arm free. "I don't care what you think. I don't want this." The officer stared at her, his jaw clenched. "You'll regret this, Maya. You'll see. No one refuses me." The next few days were filled with tension. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Officer Mark was always watching her. She tried to avoid him, but it wasn't easy. Everywhere she went, it seemed like he was there, lurking in the background, waiting for her to change her mind. Maya felt the pressure building, and the wall seemed to be closing in on her. Her life was no longer her own. Officer Mark's obsession with her was growing stronger. Maya knew she had to act fast. She couldn't let him control her life. But little did she know, things were about to take a terrifying turn. Officer Mark's obsession was no longer just about winning her over. It was about proving that she belonged to him and that he could force her into submission if necessary. She had rejected his advances, and that, to him, was unforgivable. As Maya walked home one afternoon, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Officer Mark had made up his mind, and his decision would lead to an unimaginable encounter that would alter her fate.